Oi, 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 gamers, welcome back to the channel. I hope you've unclenched your jaw today and are practicing that gratitude. Get your water, of course, because today we are going to be giving you 5 Dead by Daylight killer tips for controller players. But to do so, I think we have to first outline a few things. First off, there are always meme comments of just don't play console, play PC. Duh. I think it's really important to acknowledge limitations in one's life that may prevent them from investing in a good PC. Lack of money, lack of stability. Hell, I never played PC games until I was a grown-ass adult. People may already have a console, a Switch, a PS4, etc., and want to hop in to try experiencing the game. We, as a community, shouldn't dissuade a player base from playing on a platform we personally don't like or personally don't benefit from, and instead give them all the tools possible to succeed where they are. And on top of that, a lot of people may play with controller for accessibility issues, repetitive stress injuries, etc. So, all of that being covered, and hopefully, barring any further YouTube comment addressing, let's dive right in. Tip number 1 is to know the basic strategies. Now, this tip may sound like a cop-out, but hear me out here. I've been playing DBD on PC for about almost 3 years now, but recently committed to playing a ton more while sitting on my couch on the PS4. The beautiful thing here is that while the mechanics and precise motion took me a very much longer period of time to refine, the basics of DBD were still very much intact. Knowing how to 3-gen, how survivors move, how to pressure, mind games, etc. all led me to a red rank with some really dumpster perks and builds. Hell, I can even play Nurse a teeny bit on console. It could be easy to say that you have this massive disadvantage because you're on console, but the reality is that if you have the knowledge and are constantly seeking to learn more, that is what will more than likely put you into red ranks, more than mechanical skill and more than perks, okay? If you want to know more about specific killer tips, mind games, 3-gens, etc., we have a whole playlist here for you, and we do have game reviews in our Discord if you'd like us to review some of your matches, but the mechanical skill comes with time. Getting the knowledge will help you to be able to bridge that gap. Tip number 2 is to up your sensitivity. This is something I had to practice a lot, as when I play things like Halo or Call of Duty, I usually run a really low controller sensitivity because my aim's kind of ass. But in Dead by Daylight, you may want to up your sensitivity a bit higher. The reason for this is to counter 360s and be able to mind game better while keeping your head on a swivel and being able to look around while you're walking away from hooks, gens, etc. On average, I run a 70% sensitivity. This just barely allows me to turn around and walk through a loop backwards, hide my red stain, all these mind games, etc., and allows me to hit people while they're trying to spin me with 360s. If you do turn this number up a bit higher, and you can control the killers still, and you can actually acclimate to a higher percentage sensitivity, absolutely do it. It is worth noting that some killers really require the highest sensitivity as well. Super Alf, one of the most well-known and best Nurse players, started out on console and now plays PC, and they say that if you're running controller, 70% sensitivity is the minimum, of course, here. So, tip number 3, minor motions and muscle memory. Now, this very much ties in with the prior tip regarding having a higher sensitivity in the game, but get used to barely moving the stick to turn your camera, all right? And get used to making these smoother sweeping motions rather than very jolty, quick flicking actions. And to do this, you're gonna have to learn to very much control the amount of pressure that your thumb applies to the stick on your controller, okay? As you can see here in the corner, I'm not pressing terribly hard on my right stick. This gives me smoother motion, which helps me to visually track survivors better, and things of this nature. It also just kind of, it's really great muscle memory. This means that you'll overturn less, right? So if you see a survivor fishtailing in front of you, swinging side to side, and you've missed your swing because you over-rotate your swing, well, this may be because you overturned your camera. You applied too much pressure on the right stick. So again, just applying less pressure and being able to get smoother motion will kind of ensure that you're not over-swinging, missing, hitting things you shouldn't be hitting, right? It is far, far better to have a higher sensitivity and kind of tune your muscle memory to that higher sensitivity than to have a low sense and just try to run with it, okay? It takes a lot more practice, and yes, it will be absolutely frustrating, but it's 100% worth it. Next time you're playing, try your best to be aware of how much pressure you're placing on that right stick, okay? Think about how often the stick is actually hitting the controller casing on the side and try to minimize that. Tip number 4, be more patient. I'm not sure if this applies specifically to controller. It kind of helps everything in DBD a ton, but if you're being 360'd a ton on controller, turn your sensitivity up, yes, but also maybe just wait for a second. Just wait a bit longer to take that swing. If somebody's spinning into you, maybe back up a little bit or just spin with them before you swing so you can get the hit. Generally, the person that 360s will spin in a circle, which means they'll end where they started. So if you want to be more patient, that will also help, because 360s are easier to do on PC for survivors and very hard for controller killers to counter because of the lack of speed in movement. All right. Now, if you are much closer to a survivor, in many cases, you can absolutely just smash the stick in the direction the survivor is turning in the middle of their 360 and still down them as well. So be very aware of that. But also, like I said, if you're swinging too early, if you're getting dead-hearted against and things like that, general rule of thumb for Dead by Daylight as a killer is just to be slightly more patient. Wait these things out, and generally that works out better for you, okay? Tip number 5 is specific issues with specific killers on controller, of course. Console DBD offers you around 45 frames per second or less, unless you're on a PS5 or Xbox One X, in which case these get about 60 FPS, right? But 45 frames per second or less, depending on the map and what's happening, this generally means that there's more latency between when you press a button and what happens, okay? So Super Alf says that with Nurse, you have to kind of be a cut above the rest and know exactly where people are before you blink, as it's harder to react with the appropriate speed post-blink, and again, frames. There are times with Nurse where you just have goofy interactions and you hit things that aren't there or whatever, so be prepared for that no matter what. But with Blight, you unfortunately are kind of shit out of luck. Even at max sensitivity, Blight doesn't get the same flick as well as he does on PC, and I have a feeling that has a lot to do with DPI and things like that, considering J-flicking exists. So if you really want to play Blight on console, I commend you, but you'll just never quite be as effective as you would be on mouse and keyboard. Now, Oni feels pretty similar, but a little bit more forgiving than Blight. It is a tad harder to get the necessary 90-degree flicks in certain areas and in certain ways, but even at about an 85 cents, for me, it mostly feels about right. Huntress, of course, is tough, right? We always talk about aiming and things like that, but if you're patient and use hatchets to mind game, you can still get great hits, right? If you see survivors fishtailing in front of you, wait for them to fishtail into where you want to throw, right? So wait for them to kind of line up with your reticle a la Star Wars a little bit, right? Flicks are much harder to do, flick shots on controller, but they're not impossible. So don't let that be a limitation you have, as you can see on screen here. Now, Billy, for me, seems to mostly play the same. I don't really notice any huge issues with curving of chainsaws. You still get the 90-ish degree turns and things of that nature. General controller goofiness, but he feels about the same. And Trickster is a weird one. I had to turn down my sensitivity to around 50%. So, as mentioned before, fast-tracking aim for me is a little bit difficult. And unlike Huntress, where you can mind game them into the hatchet, mind gaming them into 1 or 2 knives is not enough. It's not potent enough, right? You have to hit 8 knives, which means I needed a little bit of help smoothing my motion out, and so I turned my controller sensitivity down for him specifically, okay? It's conceivable you could learn him with a high sense. I just haven't yet, and it's frustrating, so I haven't, but be aware of that. Of course, you have to hit a lot more knives than Huntress, so. M1 killers all feel relatively similar to me, from demo to Wraith and things of that nature. And when it comes to mind games, again, you'll want that 70 plus sensitivity, and you're just going to want to really work on applying the appropriate amount of pressure as you mind game, moonwalk, hide your red stain, and things of that nature. You should be fine otherwise. So if you are a Wraith main or a demo main, you should still have a great time without too many problems or issues. Of course, I hope these tips help you guys out. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything that you didn't know or that really helped you out here. In my head, it feels like all this stuff is really, really obvious, you know, with regards to sensitivity and muscle memory. As a rank 1 killer on PC, transitioning to PlayStation was difficult, but like I said, the knowledge is the biggest piece. The mechanical skill will come with practice and muscle memory. So I hope you guys pick up your favorite killers and play them to your heart's content and get good, unless you're a Blight player, of course, and you're shit out of luck. All that being said, of course, let me know what you guys think down below, and I will be praying to the entity to see you guys in the next videos.